Welcome back to Signal Outdoors. I have a little bit of an adventure planned for this evening. An adventure for me, first night in a hot tent. So just to be safe, I'm going to set up in the backyard to start with, and we're going to do one night in the backyard so I can learn all the gear and make sure I know what I'm doing here. So step one is to get some wood split. I had to go get a full-size axe. I didn't have a full-size axe previously. I had a just small hatchet. And I had to take a tree down this summer, so I have a bunch of wood that some of it I'll have to split, some of them I can just cut down to size. So let's get some wood prepped here while we still have some daylight. Rule number one of survival: always use the tools that are at your disposal. I actually didn't need the axe because I had enough small stuff. Well, if that's not enough wood to keep that stove running all night, I'll be astonished. And maybe cold. So the next step is going to be to get my snowshoes on and create a snowpack platform for my hot tent. I'm going to be doing that right in the middle of the yard here. So grab my snowshoes and we'll get that packed down. It's actually kind of cold out, so the snow doesn't really even want to pack down that much. So now we're going to get the tent out, and we're going to try to get that set up here. First time setting this up, but I did read the manual. We got her all set up, run out of daylight. It's not super windy, so I'm not gonna stake out the tie downs there. Well, maybe I'll do the one on the stove side, we'll see. Better go do a walk around here. Sets up real quick. This thing sets up real quick, so. Go take a look inside here. Okay. So my stove on this side, there's the stove jack. This zips shut so you can fit a lantern up there or whatever. That's kind of sweet. And then I'm gonna actually just put a piece of plastic down, and then I have a 10-degree sleeping pad and a 15-degree sleeping bag. I'm hoping that with the stove I should stay plenty warm tonight. So we'll see. Let's get the stove set up here. I think first I'm gonna run the pipe out the stove jack. So when I tear down, I'll show you this better. I had to get help with this, do this ahead of time, because it's difficult to roll up the first time. Once it burns in, it kind of has a memory to it and will remember. But it'll make more sense at tear down. I'll show you at tear down. So we're going to be using the Luxe 3W tent, the smaller stove, the smaller of the two. Try not to drop anything because it's going to be a super pain to find any of this stuff if I were to do so. Okay. Here's our bottom. We slide our sides into the groove here. Sorry you can't see this. I don't really have a good angle for you. Tight quarters. And here's the back of our stove. It kind of just slides nicely into these grooves in the back. This whole thing only weighs 4 pounds with the flue and everything. There's the front of our stove. And the top of our stove. Now here's the tricky part. At least when I tried this indoors and did a test run, it's kind of tricky. So now we just take the tops off of here. Through the bottom. Yeah, this is the tricky part. Go. Dang it. Yeah, trying to get these through here without the rest of it falling apart is a bit tricky in my opinion. Maybe it's just lack of experience, but where is it? There it is. Fit that on there. There we go. Oh, it wasn't. There's just the wing nuts on the bottom that tighten it all up. I don't think you have to go super tight. Oh. Might have to grab a few split pieces of wood to set this on. And now we just roll this on itself. I think it's going to be windy tonight. I'm probably going to put the other tie-outs down. There we go. On the edge of the stove. And this goes over the flue pipe according to their instructions, and be very careful because it's super sharp. Maybe it makes more sense to do this first. Yep, makes more sense to do that first. Right. Whew. All right, we did it. Now we wait for the kids to go to sleep. I'm gonna come out here and try a night in the hot tent. Alrighty, boys and girls, we're ready to get this party started. Went ahead and loaded up the tent. I spared you watching me blow up my sleeping pad and all that good stuff. So what we're gonna do next here is break down some kindling. And after do that, we're gonna put more tie downs down because the tent is blowing all over the place here. So we're gonna break down some kindling and get ready to start the stove here. Okay, so what we've done, I don't know if you can see in there or not, but I have a ton of cotton balls and Vaseline in there. On either side I put logs just to keep stuff off of the bottom of the stove so I can get heat underneath the pieces of wood. So all of the little chunks of wood have little ice on it, or a little bit of ice on them. So I don't think those are gonna be difficult to light. So what I think I'm gonna do is take this log that I split with an axe earlier. I'm gonna take my hatchet and I'm gonna cut pieces out of this because the interior is gonna be nice and dry. We're gonna cut kindling off this, I think, to get it going, and then switch to this. Then I'll start breaking down stuff until we can start throwing logs like this in there. And then we should be rocking and rolling. Once we get a good hot coal base, we got plenty of wood to keep this thing going all night. Okay, we'll call it good. We'll call that good for a little bit. Okay, so we're basically done with the chores outside. You got put all the tie downs in. It actually gives you a little bit more space in the tent as well, I'm finding, and it stops the side walls from flapping so much in the wind. So you can tell by my breath it's warming up a little bit in here, but it's not warming all the way up because I still have the door open, given that this is the first burn-in on this stove. So I'm going to let that get good and hot for a while. I'll just chillax while it burns off. I also putting some wood on top of the stove here just to kind of dry it out before it gets put into the stove. Once the coals get hot enough, I won't have to mess with that, but that's what I'm doing for now. Also, there's a spark arrestor on this stove down at the bottom here, and I have this is the dampener that for the chimney. So, oops, it's burning on the chimney there. Got a red hot pipe down there. But so once this gets good and going, and when I want to calm down for the night, I can dampen this way down and then dampen the front so that the stove doesn't get as much oxygen, and it should burn for much longer. So I've been hanging out in the tent here for a while. It's about 9:30 at night now. Stove has a good enough coal bed that I can throw damp pieces of wood on it and it will stay going. The one thing that I didn't realize is that damper wood just really doesn't put off the BTUs like dry wood will. So as you can see, a lot of this wood here has been sitting in my wood pile and it had snow on it, So it's all kind of damp or has frozen, just ice all over it. Which is good because that's going to probably be the conditions I'm going to be exposed to when I'm actually out doing this. Out in the woods, not in my backyard. So this is a good lesson to learn. It cooled off. I put some bigger logs on here that were wet, so the stove kind of slowed down a little bit, but I was up to 31 degrees in here. I was hoping to get like in the 60s or 70s in here, but we'll see. I don't know that we're going to get there with this wood, but so the wood has to sit there and smolder for quite a while before it dries out and then finally goes. So I got the dampener opened up quite a ways just to kind of make sure I get a nice coal bed going, and then I'll dampen it down before I go to bed. So for those of you that are curious as to what gear I have out here with me, let's go over that. So I think this is always going to come with me, just a indoor-outdoor thermometer. I think it's kind of nice to know what it is outside versus inside. I have a CO2 or a carbon monoxide detector with me, just because I'm new to this whole game. One thing that's super valuable when you're hot tenting is a pair of leather gloves, because you're going to be touching hot things all the time. Those are awesome. So I have a regular hatchet with me. When I'm actually out in the woods, I'm going to have a 3.5 pound axe with me as well, so I can split down some bigger stuff if needed. This is the Luxe 3W hot tent stove. I never knew what 3W stood for until I got the stove, and it stands for Wild Wild West apparently. I have some wood piled up underneath here that's kind of drying out the heat from the stove. Here's my REI. Jesus, I burnt a hole in my jacket. Here's my REI FlexLight chair. It's got the underquilt on it to keep your backside nice and warm. I have the REI Magma 15 degree down quilt, 850 fill power down. And under that, I have the Tensor insulated 10 it says 10, I think it'll go down to 10 degrees. So it's the Tensor insulated. This is the long and wide model. And then below that I have a plastic sheet that my sleeping pad's going on top of. I have my DIY knee rest here. That's super awesome to have, so I'm not constantly kneeling in the snow, because this is a floorless tent. And so the tent I'm in is Luxe Outdoors Mega Horn 4-person tent. It says you can sleep 2 on one side and then put the stove on the other side, but it'd be pretty tight with 2 people in here. You could do it, but you wouldn't be lounging around like I'm doing now. Otherwise, if you wanted to use this without the stove, it's a 4-person tent. So, that's about it. So another thing I wanted to mention is that I got the Mega Horn tent that has the reflective coating in it. It's the white tent with the reflective coating. I was on the fence as to whether or not to go that route, but I'm glad I did. It'll keep the heat in the winter. And if I happen to use this in the summer, when sun's beating down on the tent, the heat's not going to make its way in as easy. So definitely glad I made that decision, even though I wasn't sure what to do there. But I think this is the right route to go. It's an extra $20 for that coating. So, oh yeah, and I do have a 20-liter dry bag with me that I can stuff stuff into and just set it on the snow. I don't have to worry about it getting wet. And its temperature's starting to drop. I think it's going to get down to 10 degrees tonight, I think. And the temperature inside is dropping too, because I put some big logs in the stove and it slowed down quite a bit. So hopefully I can get this roaring again. Okay, well, I'm winding down for the night here. I'm probably going to throw a couple more logs on the fire here and get ready to crawl into my sleeping bag. I'll probably set my alarm for an hour to start with. I'll wake up within an hour and we'll see where the stove's at, and then I'll probably see how long I can increase the time I can be asleep for. 'Cause I wanna run this thing all night just to see what it takes to run this thing all night if I needed to. So, but I do. One thing I forgot to mention is I do have a Thermarest reactor, which adds another 20 degrees to my sleeping bag. It's a liner that goes inside, so I'll be sleeping in my pants. I got wool socks. I'll probably just sleep in my button-up shirt without my jacket, because I'm well within the specs of my sleeping gear with the stove running. So I'm gonna load the stove up like I said and get ready to crawl into bed here. Ouch. The stove is hot. I think that's too much wood, but... Oh shit. Weird. I got it dampened down. I might need to dampen it down further. She's loaded up pretty good. So it's midnight. About an hour ago I got up and refilled up the fire, but it had almost gone out. So it's got cold in here again. I'm resisting the urge to bail. I'm gonna give it another hour. My sleeping pad isn't quite sufficient. I should have another layer underneath it, so I can feel the cold kind of soak into my back a little bit. But the stove is actually picking back up again, so I'm gonna give it another hour and see if it's better. If not, I'm gonna bail. That's totally cool. That's what this test nights are for. And we'll just make some changes. So I'm gonna check back in an hour here, and we'll see where we're at. But right now, it's looking like I'm gonna bail because I'm getting a little cold. I think it's like 5 degrees, 3 degrees out now. I'm not sure what it is in the tent. I don't want to get on my sleeping bag to look. But we'll check back in an hour here, and we'll see where we're at. So I decided to make the decision to bail. My sleeping pad just isn't quite cutting it in this cold. I should have put something else underneath it, another foam pad underneath it. You can get a cheap foam pad to throw under there. Also, sliding all over the place on this snow. I have a plastic sheet underneath my sleeping pad, and it just slide all over the place. And actually, I looked up once after I nodded off just briefly, and my feet were almost hanging out from underneath the tent. So I'm gonna wait for this stove to die down a little bit, warm up for a second. And I'm gonna head inside here and get some good quality sleep. We'll be back in the morning with lessons learned and what I'm gonna change the next time. But there's nothing wrong with bailing. We're just in my backyard, and this is a test night, and that's what they're about. So we'll see you in the morning.